All right. So here we are, and I just want to welcome everyone to our Legal Wellbeing Network meeting. And we try to have these every other month. I know there was a bit of a gap because of Wellbeing Week in Law, and there was a lot going on there. So it's nice to see folks back here. This started a few years ago now, actually 2.5 years ago now, I think, which has really been an opportunity for people who are interested in well-being in the profession to connect with each other, to learn from each other. We try to bring in speakers, we try to have some discussion, and we pull from a diverse group of legal professionals and folks who are sort of have some nexus to the legal community and are interested in this work. So thank you for joining us. I see one of our committee co-chairs, Mala Rafiq. Hello, Mala. Thank you for joining us. And I see some committee members here as well. So thank you all for joining us. One thing I just wanted to point out quickly is that all of our past recordings, meeting recordings, are available via YouTube. We have a YouTube playlist, and you can find that on our website. The last meeting was in March, and we talked at that meeting about the results of the NORC report, the Massachusetts report on well-being of lawyers in Massachusetts. And we had a great conversation, and it was fantastic to hear feedback from folks in this group. And we continue to receive feedback and thoughts and comments about the results of that report. And one theme in particular that has come out of the discussions, and certainly we discussed it at the last meeting, is the impact of courts and judges on lawyer well-being. And we have heard concerns related to the behavior of judges, issues with scheduling and unrealistic deadlines, judges requiring in-person hearings when they're unnecessary. We have heard from lawyers asking that judges be more mindful to these issues that are faced by lawyers, to use their authority to enforce the rules and call out bad behavior, particularly bias discrimination and bullying when they see it. We have talked to the justices about this. We are working with the courts and the judges to integrate into trainings and programs this discussion, and starting to look at either like some policies or rules regarding secured leave from the court, and some other ideas. So we are listening, and hopefully with your help we will continue to pursue those efforts. As I mentioned, oh no, I'm not there yet. What I wanted to do is just give you just a few real quick updates from the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. And I think I know many of you, not all of you. I'm the director of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. My name is Heidi Alexander. I use she, they pronouns. This is the third annual report. If you haven't seen this, we have it up on our website. We sent an email out. We have we've put out a report for the past 3 years, which is unbelievable that we've had this committee running for the past 3 years, and there's a number of different updates in there. You know, we thank all of you. I know I see so many people here who are involved in this work, and we couldn't do it without you. So, you know, take a look at what we all did together over the past year. So that's one item. And then also, I hope that folks had the opportunity to participate in Wellbeing Week in Law. I know that there were events and programs and opportunities to connect over the course of that week in May, the first week of May. And that was actually I think it was the 4th year of Wellbeing Week in Law, which they're founded by the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, and they put out a lot of really great resources during that week and provided a number of different programs. We did a number of programs here locally, and there are a number of bar associations that also did programs, these community connection programs, community gatherings. And so in addition to some programs with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, Mindfulness in Law Society. And so lots of great things happening that week. And of course, we don't want to just talk about well-being just that week, right? We want this to continue throughout the course of the year. So that's, one of the reasons why we continue these Legal Wellbeing Network meetings, because it provides us with that opportunity. So, so thank you all for your participation. The other thing I want to mention is that folks may be familiar with the SJC rule change back in 2020 that actually required all lawyers in Massachusetts to provide demographic information when they registered to be licensed in Massachusetts. And the idea here was to, try to figure out, what's the makeup of our lawyers in Massachusetts, so we can provide services, so we can increase the diversity of our profession. And I am just thrilled to let people know that just recently we released, and I actually haven't even sent out a press release on this or anything, so you're the first group that's learning about it, which is an interactive dashboard. And you can actually look and you can sort and you can filter and you can look at, geography and look at specific identities and practice areas. And the number of people in a firm or organization. And so you can look at all of that demographic information and use it for, for your own purposes. And we've been hearing from a lot of organizations and workplaces that are hoping to use this to increase the diversity of their workforces. And I'll put that link in the chat in a few moments. But that's really exciting stuff. Just a couple of other things I wanted to share with you is that we are opening another session of the Standing Committee's Attorney Mentoring Program. This is kind of building off the success of our pilot statewide program back in 2020. We continue to focus on new lawyers, solo and small firm lawyers, first generation lawyers, lawyers from underrepresented groups, and lawyers in transition. And so I know there's a number of people here who are serving as mentors, and very much appreciate that. If you would like to be a mentor in this program, it's not a huge time commitment. Please go to the link and sign up if you would like mentorship, and you can be anyone who, even if you're an experienced practitioner, you can find mentorship here. And so you can sign up as a mentee if you'd like, but that's going to open, that program is going to start next week. And related to mentoring, there is actually a panel discussion tomorrow hosted by Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers at 4:30, and I'll put this link in the chat as well, all about mentoring and the connection between mentoring and well-being. And so I know there's folks here that are on the panel, and I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic program. So we have that. So that's what I wanted to share with all of you. And now I want to transition over to our speakers, because that's who everyone came here to listen to. And I'm very excited to hear these speakers. Actually, these three speakers, we have been going back and forth for months, and I canceled on them twice. So I appreciate them coming back and joining us. We have three speakers. We have Nita Camillo, who is the Director of Wellbeing, Global Large Law at Thomson Reuters. We have Adam Reiber, who's the Director of Wellbeing at Morgan Lewis. And then we also have Wendy Tamas Robbins, who is the founder and CEO at Cave Club. She's also a member of the Massachusetts Bar Association Wellbeing Committee. She's written a book, and we work very closely with her. So I'm very excited to hear from all these folks. So I think I want to turn things over to Nita and Adam to kick things off. Thank you again for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself first, or do you want me to go?
You can go.
Okay. Well, I'll just start and say, first of all, thank you so much for including me today. I'm really thrilled to be here and sharing the space with all of you, and particularly you, Adam. My name, as Heidi said, is Nita Camillo. I have been with Thomson Reuters for now over 20 years, which is crazy to think about, in various different roles. I currently actually wear two hats. One is as a global client director, where I oversee kind of the holistic and strategic relationship between, our largest, most strategic law firms and Thomson Reuters. And then the other, as Heidi said, as the director of well-being for Global Large Law, which is both an internal and an externally facing role, in that I'm building the well-being strategy for TR, and also we're working closely with our strategic partners, law firms like Morgan Lewis, where Adam is, to provide data and insights and advisory as firms prioritize talent and culture and well-being and really a sustainable workplace. Adam, do you want to go?
Thanks for having me today. It's funny because I think I always start our lawyer well-being sessions with, it's such a small world, and I recognize a lot of faces. Some of you I've even presented with before in the past. So thanks for having me. My name is Adam Reber. I'm Director of Wellbeing for Morgan Lewis. I'm not new to the role anymore. I can't say that. I've been in over a year and a half now. So prior to that, I was with Microsoft doing much of the same in tech. And I think some of the discussion that we'll have today is technology-based and generative AI and what that means for well-being, especially in the law industry. So, and I will mention Unmind. I see that Matt is here because that kind of all correlates together. So prior to that, Microsoft, I did 20 years in the US Army, where I was an airborne ranger, infantry. And a lot of my background, I think, comes from leadership development, developing competencies. And while I was in the military, we had two conflicts where we had to shift our skills-based leadership development to more of a competency-based leadership development. So when I entered the civilian workforce, I saw like there's a stark need to do that as well. And you can take tech, you can take the law industry, any industry, and there's blaring like similarities in each, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, it's great. So the way that Adam and I kind of talked about, at least in prep for our conversation today, was to have it be super casual and dynamic and almost more like a fireside chat. So that's how we're going to structure it today. And I just want to kind of start out with an acknowledgement. I'm really excited to be having this conversation in and amongst what is, frankly, a lot of disruption that we are experiencing right now in the legal industry. I think that there couldn't be a more important moment than this one to pause and kind of consider with intention how we want to live and work and operate and exist in the future of this profession. And as we speak right now in this moment, Thomson Reuters is actually hosting a webcast called The New Era and Redefining How Legal Professionals Do Their Work. So I encourage people to, check that out afterwards, or recording afterwards. But of course, that session that we're hosting is brought on by kind of this preoccupation recently around AI, generative AI, applied AI, and what it all means. And it's frankly something that we've all been talking a lot about, and how this fits into our organizational purpose, our ambition, our strategic journey to kind of execute upon, our business and our growth initiatives in what is just a time of tremendous disruption. And so I only say that because I really feel like we are at a tipping point in the ways of working that will have to change. And we need to figure out what this means for us as people and as organizations to kind of sustain and thrive in a modern economy. And I'm especially grateful for friends and mentors and colleagues like Adam, who kind of keep organizations like Thomson Reuters, where I work, honest and thinking about all the ways of human impact and how we impact that with disruptive technology, because it has tremendous impact in a lot of ways on the well-being of those in this profession. So You know, I was thinking about, you know, how to kind of frame this up. And Adam, like if we want to kind of talk about, you know, what do you think about what all of this means and how we should be thinking about a pivot in the way that we develop skills for the future, you know, with all of the attention that we've had around AI and technology right now?
Yeah, I think this kind of harps on kind of the conversation we had prior to jumping on this call. So what I want to touch on is competency-based leadership development. And that's simply nothing more than observing the behavior, classifying it, having to facilitate discussion for self-realization, and then developing that behavior. And I think when law firms can align their values and their competencies more closely with how do you optimize human functioning, how do you thrive, how do you build well-being inside your organization, when we can do that, link those things. So well-being has to be integrated throughout the entire, I always say this, like, yes, I'm the director of well-being, but well-being is not my thing. It's everybody's thing, right? I help facilitate it and help bring in programming and things like that. But like when we have it integrated into our professional development and our human resources tools and resources, things like that, like that's when I think you're going to make a real impact. So, you know, you have your values, right? Those are lawyer non-negotiables. Those are things you will not sacrifice to get the job done, right? And then you have your competencies, and those are nothing more than just observed behaviors, right? And I think when we have competencies that are observed behaviors throughout the organization or the firm, and they're closely aligned with well-being, and they're not counter, because you have a lot of mechanisms that are already counter, right? So the more we can mitigate that, the more I think that people will feel supported, you know, in their career, because the skepticism on workplace well-being, especially in law, is really high, right? So like that's one barrier that we have to, you know, overcome or talk through. So
I like that you sort of bring that up in that way around like this whole idea around skepticism around well-being, or this notion that in and of itself, it's this like fluffy concept that or people associate it with being a little bit fluffy and as a sort of second tier priority. I had this epiphany months ago, and Adam, you and I discussed this, but for the benefit of everybody else, I feel like for so long, all this time, I've been saying how passionate I personally am about well-being. And the epiphany came when I thought about, well, like, why? Like, why is that so important to me? And I realized what I'm really passionate about is how to perform at the highest level.
yeah.
And I mean, most of us, and I would dare say all of us that are probably present here on this call that are in this field or in this industry are driven by a desire to perform, you know, to win and to be the best advocate for whomever it is that we're representing. And I believe that in order to have any chance of performing at the highest, you know, and most optimal level in work, or frankly in anything, it requires a kind of a genuine and intentional commitment to oneself, to one's, you know, well-being, and all that means, you know, for the individual, and how we can kind of show up as our best selves to do that. So I almost feel like we as an industry need to reframe this a bit and view well-being as not this kind of fluffy concept, but really as like foundational and fundamental to optimal performance, so that we can do the best work that we can to zealously represent our clients.
Yeah, that was a shift I am working through right now. And I could even say this, like we had our summer interns come in, so we had a academy, right? And with some of the comments where it seems like you're trying to get us more efficient at our job so we can be more productive. And it's like, yes, and like the workplace is a great place to actually exercise a lot of the concepts in well-being. When you talk about meaning and purpose, achievement, like we get a lot of our well-being from work, right?
Mm-hmm. So
to separate them out and say, like, you know, the workplace is responsible for all the negatives, but not then responsible for a lot of human thriving, optimal human functioning is not a good way to look at it, right? So like, setting goals, achieving goals, like all those things can be enhanced in the workplace. So I steered away from well-being as performance when I first transitioned over, because it was almost like a no-no to do in Microsoft. We want to do it for its own sake, right?
Mhm.
But here it's like, hey, no, when we're talking about optimal human functioning, you're talking about being the best at all the things, right? All your domains, and occupational is one of those domains. So we can't, mitigate that and not talk about it. So, and then for some, it comes across as, oh, hey, you're just trying to squeeze more product. And it's like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, like, hey, we're trying to implement these things and get you to reframe your thinking around what causes meaning and purpose, or things like that. So then you have that. I think even just priming, like, the way people think, and it's one of the great studies was the hotel maid study. If you're not familiar with that, it was just, all they did was reframe their work, right? They told half, had a control group, right? Didn't tell them anything, told the other half that, hey, what you're doing is physical activity and exercise. So, like, and then they measured all the biometrics, and they found that weight loss, health biometrics were all improved to the half that they told they were actually doing physical activity, and here's the benefits of physical activity. And the other half didn't move or budge. So even, like, the knowledge of knowing, like, hey, what you're doing is actually contributing to a meaningful life and purpose, like, could then affect having meaning in life and purpose in your life.
And I think law firms, even, or just the industry generally, even if you don't work for a law firm, but if you work for any type of organization that wherein you're practicing law, is this, like, connection between that, like, understanding what that purpose is, what you do on a daily basis to to impact the world around you, and how that in and of itself, like, impacts your own individual well-being, and what to draw that connection for, like, the work that you're doing and what that's producing, and how that has the ability to impact why you do what you do, and the quality with which you do it is really significant. I also think that there's increasingly become this, not just an acknowledgement, but a true recognition on the part of law firm leaders now, that, like, how much of a connection there is with this. And I want to share a story with you. I had the opportunity just about a month ago to attend the legal executive briefing at Pebble Beach, which is where we bring together, like, the managing partners and the chairs of some of the largest law firms around the world. I call it the Davos of legal professionals, because, like, they kind of, like, share their ideas and talk about what's top of mind for them. And, in the 3 days that we were there were two topics that really kind of underpinned every single conversation. And the two topics that resonated most with law firm leaders were around generative AI and technology, and talent optimization. And there was a recognition of how inextricably connected these two things are. And as I think about, what lawyers and law firm leaders, care about most, and I said it before, it's performing at, the highest level, but doing so over a sustainable period of time. And the comment that resonated with me the most at that session was from the chair of one of the largest law firms in the world, who said, not all expenses are expenses, that they are long-term investments. And what he was referring to were investments that firm, or that we as an industry make, not just on the tools that lawyers use or the technology that lawyers use, but on the people themselves. And, like, they're really thinking so much more about how to optimize people and cultures, and putting a real emphasis and priority around, attracting and keeping top level talent, so that they can provide, superior level of client service. And it's absolutely necessary to be thinking about what that means in terms of, like, supporting that optimization effort. One of the things, Adam, that you and I were kind of, like, talking about before was around, how do we do that in and amongst an environment now where we are contending with so many different expectations and generational differences. You know, I think right now we have 5 generations in the workplace. How do you suggest, or how do you think about navigating this? And can technology actually help with facilitating the ways that we navigate this?
I think, had you talked to me a month ago about AI, I was so optimistic. But I think I'm like a hour 126 in my journey in understanding what AI even is, right? Because I came from Microsoft, I came from a tech background, like I thought I knew. And then I started doing I started just really learning, digging in and learning about it. And when we talk about like changes and disruption, I don't think we know what is coming. I think we just see like the tip of the iceberg, right? I am not a doom and gloom prophet on generative AI, but I do believe it has a ability to displace a lot of the workforce, right? And that's nothing that we haven't dealt with in the past. While at Microsoft, part of what we were doing was essentially working ourselves out of a job without really even knowing it, right? So what we're doing is we're building these efficiencies and expanding, and this is in the data center environment, without growing. So then now you have double the footprint with a way less headcount. And I think if we were to look at like the future, that might be what it looks like, right? You have double the footprint with less headcount. So this is exactly why competency-based leadership development is vital going forward, is because it allows people to pivot. So when you're good at problem solving, communication, collaboration, then you can then get put in a new situation, a changing situation, and be successful. If you're very skills oriented and skills based, and those skills that are required for you to be successful in the future, that's gonna be a harder shift, right? So I think when the quicker we can pivot to a competency based leadership development model, and that's not just like doing your academies, having your PD team do it. It's how your partners are interacting with associates, the questions they're asking. Are they delegating in the sense that they're being direct, or are they doing like are they asking questions to assess judgment, things like that. So instead of being around, if you're a meeting at a table, you don't just tell people what to do. You ask them what they think they should do, and then you can then assess their judgment and kind of critique and guide their thinking a little bit, right? So like, and that's really hard, I think, to establish, and it will take years to do it. I had one of my previous roles was a leadership developer for Army ROTC cadets in college, and I had them for 4 years. And that's about how long it took to develop leaders. It took about 4 years, and that model, to think we can do it. And I always say this, and I know it rubs people the wrong way, but like to think we could do it with like, hour-long seminars and just simply imparting the knowledge. Like having the knowledge doesn't mean that you're going to act on it, right? So like the adult learning model is allowing people time to practice. And when they have that time to practice, that's when they refine and hone their skills. So that's going to be vital going forward.
Well, I want to add to something that you just said, or maybe even just elaborate on something that you said, because I think you almost buried the lead a little bit, because you hit on something that I think is absolutely critical for like the future of this profession and the future of the professions as a whole, whether you're talking about the legal profession or the clients that we serve. And that is that there is so much, you started off by saying this, there's so much that technology is going to disrupt in the way of, taking over tasks that were once done by lawyers who were able to, and this might sound controversial, who were able to kind of like hide behind the billable hour for being able to do those tasks. And that is no longer going to be an option. It's going to be now where the model is challenged, and we're going to be potentially looking at more value-based billing as opposed to like that hourly-based billing. What you talked about with respect to leadership development, or I would just say human development, is like the skills that are necessary to build connection and relationships, to retain clients, and to be the firm or the person or the lawyer that has the opportunity to win that business is now like the skill set that we need to develop. And that is a human skill set that is supported by the same types of efforts that for firms or organizations that have well-being programs in place is exactly what you are fostering when you have a good or proper well-being program. It's like, how are you empowering individuals to thrive in the way that is authentic to them, that enables for the best human connection, that enables them to, be performing, at their best in a way that works, for them. So I think you hit the nail on the head with respect to like the types of training that we're going to be needing to think about. But what do you think are some of the barriers or obstacles in law firms culture or just the industry culture that we need to address in order to be able to do this?
I think it's so important, because I think a misnomer is, let's just wait it out, right? Generationally, and that's not a good plan.
Yeah.
It takes a while, and I'll be one of the generations that's waited out, right? There's a misnomer that younger generations actually seek help. They do talk about mental, they have mental awareness, but they're no more likely to seek help than any other generation, and that's in the data. However, we do have data that supports like it's not going well for younger generations. Before we were just kind of poo-poo on millennials and say, XYZ, they're just the new generation entering the workforce, therefore they're the target. And it's like, we didn't really have data that supported the generals or millennials were any worse off. But now we do have data that supports Gen Zs are actually worse off with self-inflicted harm, like hospitalizations and things like that. So Jonathan Haidt is one of the researchers responsible for that. And if you're interested, check out some of his work, because he's one of the ones that go to social media companies and say, try to get the like button removed for age 13 and below, or whatever it is, right? Instagram, I think, did that. He was pivotal in that action. So we have this data for Gen Zs, and they're now entering the workforce. Millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers. I think there is a stark difference in the way. So it's a lot coming in now have had a lawyer well-being class in their university, as opposed to Gen Xers who didn't, right? And what got you here isn't going to get you there, kind of thing. So just because you didn't have it growing up, or you had a little tougher or rougher or whatever it is, like that model, like that same model, if you just cut and paste, it isn't going to work, right? So now what we're also seeing is, and I hate to say this, it's like the weaponization of well-being. Well, I can't do that work on the weekend because it affects my well-being. Like that's not an excuse to do less work, right? To not enter a very high risk field, things like that. So I think there's a balance. Like, hey, your job, it is tough. You're compensated for responsiveness and things like that. So some of that conversation has to happen early on. Well-being doesn't mean you use it as an excuse to not perform well, right? At your job, not turn a good work product, things like that.
Right. So this is going to be a little bit of a sort of sounding selfish, like promotion here, but I'm curious because you sort of brought this idea around like capturing data and maybe even benchmarks of data, right? To like start understanding and being able to show improvements in the way that you support people. But I just firmly believe that as an industry that we are not going to we're not going to be able to accomplish any of this on our own. Like it's going to be done in partnership with one another and in support of one another of one another, and that truly like a rising tide will lift all ships, that the more that we can partner together and work on things together is going to help us to evolve, our own programming as individual firms or leaders within our firms or members of our firms. But also it's just going to help us to go significantly further. So I was going to ask you, Adam, what do you think about in terms of what you need from partners? And I know we have a great partnership, but like, what do you think that we need in order to really evolve the programming so that you can accelerate your efforts as like a leader within a law firm that's trying to do this, but also just like as a member of the broader industry?
Yeah, I think I love data analytics. Like we have a lot in the lawyer industry, the profession, but we don't have it more micro. We have the macro big picture, like we know on general, like ABA, lawyers are XYZ, higher propensity to be more depressed, anxious than the general public, things like that. Like, but that doesn't tell the story within your organization, within your firm. So I think the partnership with third-party vendors helps mitigate some of that stigma, because maybe people won't be so honest on internal assessments because maybe it raises a red flag and leadership finds out. Like, these are all the things that are going through people's heads when they take that. So having a separate third-party vendor where they can do these kind of surveys, and then we get the data aggregated back so we can provide better well-being programming is optimal, right? Like, and we'll bring Unmind because Matt's on this call, but like that's exactly what they can help provide, right? And they do
it's that rack and stack, right? Like that you've talked about this before. It's like a rack and stack of law firms on their well-being and their culture by producing like a survey that is sort of standardized amongst the industry that firms take, and then they can build off it. Like, is that what you're referring to?
Well, when the rack and stack, I don't have a problem with rack and stack because I internally have a chair firm that supports lawyer well-being, mental health, things like that. So like, I don't need us to be ranked against other law firms to then take well-being seriously. But I think the industry could benefit from that because, when it gets ranked and you find you're low on these rankings, like that's all of a sudden when people really,
competitive
are tuned. Yeah, it's like, it's super, but I personally don't believe I need that for our firm. But as an industry, I think that could be beneficial, right? Like come out with, but it's a tricky thing is when you're asking people how they're doing, it's very, in the moment. So it's like,
right.
Likert scale 1 through 5, how often, are you like going to recommend your place for employment, things like that. So like, I mean, those questions are already asked. That's more like engagement stuff, but like, it just gets tricky and it's hard. I think that's probably why it hasn't been done yet.
Yeah. I know we only have like a minute or so left and we have to turn it over to Tammy, but I wanted to just ask one more question in the spirit of optimism and curiosity here. Like if we are looking, 5 years down the road, or even just 2 years down the road, just given how quickly things are moving right now with AI and technology, what do you hope that the industry looks like with respect to prioritizing well-being?
I would love it for it to be a place where I recommend my kids to go into, the field that I say like, hey, have you thought about being a lawyer? So like in 5 years, that may be optimistic, but I think that anyone who's been doing well-being long enough knows that you were laughed out of a room 10 years ago, right? We're no longer laughed out of a room. Now we're like sought after, right? You can see like by the amount of well-being consultants and companies that have, been developed over the last two plus years. But I think that the firms who do this and at a high rate it's going to be their competitive advantage for the foreseeable future. So now we're not laughed out of a room. It's almost like we're a must, as opposed to a nice to have. So I think that transition is only going to lead to optimal thriving in the lawyer profession, because everyone's aware, like no one has their head in the sand anymore. And I think a few years ago, people just turned a blind eye, but that's not the case anymore.
I agree, and I have the same hope. I think that if we get to a point where we as an industry and as individuals within an industry understand that, a focus on individual well-being, on, cultural and organizational well-being, and community well-being, frankly, is the way in which we can optimize how we serve, in every single effort, whether it's for our clients or the market, or frankly, the world as a whole. That if it's an understanding that it is foundational to our ability to perform and serve in the best ways, that's what my hope is for the future. So I think our time is up. Heidi, I don't know if you wanted to do any intro for your next speaker, but thank you so much for the opportunity that we've had to talk. And thank you, Adam. I always love talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I love the dynamic and the topics, and it raises a lot of questions and interesting thoughts for me. And so I'm hoping, maybe we could just pause here for a moment before we jump to Wendy, just to see if anyone has any thoughts they want to share or questions in thinking about the content that was just provided and all the insights. So I just want to pause, see if anyone would like to. I think we have a small enough group. Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or add something in the chat. So I will just pause here for a moment. I'm always very happy to sit in the silence because I don't get enough of it, so it doesn't bother me whatsoever.
So
Shalini, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Amy. Shalini, why don't you go ahead, and then Amy, I think it was Amy.
it was.
Shalini, go ahead,
Thank
and
you.
then we'll go to Amy. Okay.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Nita, and thanks, Adam. That was really, it's obviously really interesting. I had a quick question. Adam, you said something that is something that I hear from my students quite often, about how it's probably sometimes not in a young lawyer's best interest to say, sorry, I can't work on that this weekend because that's not good for my well-being. But how do you suggest that law students or young lawyers, as they're interviewing or sort of making choices about where they want to be and what kind of work-life sort of culture and balance they're looking for, how do you suggest they approach something like a lot of demands on weekend time or late night, texts, phone calls, things like that?
I think that when you're looking to find a job, right, you're looking at the firms that have the tools, resources, leadership support, things like that. I think that the demand of the job, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to tackle, right? Because when you're coming out of law school, you're compensated for your responsiveness, right? You really don't know a lot about how to practice law coming right out of law school, right? I think we know that. But you are compensated for your responsiveness, and you can be responsive. Now, not to say like that's always going to happen. It's not like every weekend you're getting called up, but when you do, then you have to make an assessment or judgment, right? And I think like by having the conversation and saying like, hey, I know you said you wanted this on Monday, but does it really need to be? And if they say yes, then that's what it is. But if they say, actually, you know what, Wednesday would work. So like, I think that communication is always the competency that people rely on. Everyone knows how to communicate, but it's all those other things that are deeper, why we don't communicate. So it's psychological safety, right? As an example. So if I had mentioned that in previously and I got shut down, well, then I'm less likely to bring that up again in the future. So then it's not communication, it's your psychological safety that needs to be worked on. So I would say like assess. even assess a firm, like when you're doing the interviewing on the competencies, right? Even that you're hopefully wanting to promote that. But I don't know if any of us really have that true answer of this is a demanding job. It's very high risk. There's a lot of demand. So I don't really know the answer to that. And Nita, would you have anything?
I mean, my only advice, I agree with you. And I think that there isn't like a silver bullet response that you can provide. What I would say to, a young attorney coming in and starting out is probably the same thing that I would say to, a partner with 40 years of experience, which is that you need to have like an open mind about, the experience that you're trying to gain and the experience that you're trying to impart, right? So like the challenge right now for like the older attorneys or those that are more seasoned in the profession is that they have this tendency to sort of operate under an illusion that what has worked in the past is necessarily going to work in the future. And that is not the case. And we know that that's not the case. And there is also this, on the flip side, of younger generations sort of thinking that they have, that like it's this is the environment in which I grew up and these are my expectations. And if I don't like it here, I can go elsewhere. What the reality is that there isn't, the market is not such that they can be as demanding as they were, frankly, a year and a half ago. So my advice is to go in with an open mind about what's the experience you're trying to glean from and learn from in this environment. How is it going to serve you to not be exposed to different opportunities? And also to Adam's point, to like, offer up alternatives. Like, do I need to get this done this weekend? Or is this something that can wait until next week? I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing in the right way, and being able to like have, appropriate sort of pushback and conversations, I think is important too.
Thank you. So I'll work on teaching my students how to say that nicely.
And I just wanted to say, actually, my question was pretty much the same thing. Because again, the other piece, when you have that pushback and, that's not good for my well-being, is there a number of hours that really at that point says it's too much? I recognize it can be very individualistic on how much people can handle, but do you think firms would ever consider, I think I know the answer, but would firms ever consider lowering the billable hour rate, or how does that play in? Again, you talked about the communication. Does it really need to be done? Can it wait till Monday? Something like that. But is there a bigger picture going on in terms of recognizing that maybe working 60, 80 hours might have a significant impact, even if, just say the client says, no, I need it, and they do it. But I'm just curious if you can comment on those things.
I don't know.
It's the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah, no, that's the $1 million question.
Elephant in the room.
So here's sort of, I touched on this in our commentary before. I actually think we are at a really unique time period in the industry, in that I believe that traditional models are going to be challenged because of some of the technology developments that are taking place. Do I think that the billable hour is going to vanish, in the next year or even 2 or 3 years? No, but I do think that is going to be significantly challenged because of the opportunity that is provided around, disruptive technologies and the ability to get the work done in different ways. And that's going to give us opportunities as individuals to figure out how to do more value-based billing, get the work done faster, and also work on ways in which we can optimize our performance so that we're not hamstrung by that billable hour. So I don't think, to answer your question, I think under the traditional models, it's much more challenging. I just think we're upending some of those traditional models right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are always the tough questions. Do we have other questions or comments before I move on? All right. If anyone does have any questions, comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Adam and Nita, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. Obviously, this raises a lot of important issues and things that we will continue to think about as we plow forward with this work. So I want to turn things over to Wendy Robbins, our third speaker. Wendy is, and I'm hoping Wendy you'll introduce yourself, but Wendy is in Massachusetts and she is a member of the Mass Bar Association Wellbeing Committee and has been involved in many of our efforts as well. And she's written a book. She was a former practicing lawyer at a big firm here in Massachusetts, and I'm betting that she probably has a lot of thoughts on the conversation. And I don't know whether, I'm not going to put her on the spot to comment on everything, but I know she is going to share some of her experiences with us. So Wendy, really appreciate you being here. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. I just unmuted myself and then, yeah. So I do just want to start with a comment on what Shalini was saying about like how that conversation can go as an associate, because I've been in a few rooms where this was discussed before. And I think part of it is training the leaders in law firms, the partners who are delegating this work, to be realistic, be more realistic about their deadlines and their demands, because there is this sense of crying wolf, and associates can be more mindful of the patterns that they see of the people that are the assigners of work. Like, oh, he asked for this the next day 5 times, and I've seen this work sit on his desk for weeks after that. Like, that's a red flag for me that this person isn't giving me realistic deadlines or things like that. I think that can be helpful. And then I often wonder too, if within law firms that, you know, you can track the billable hours and see if somebody's billed 80 hours in a week, maybe some little flag goes off and somebody from the coaching department or whatever, you know, HR or something checks in with them, just as like a mental health check-in. Like, we see that you worked a ton over the last month or so or something. We're just checking in to make sure that you're okay, you know. I think that those things could be helpful. Anyway, yes, so I've been an attorney for 24 years now. I practiced in Boston in big law and in-house for 24 years. I just resigned in February from practicing, and I am an author. I'm an anxiety expert. I'm a professional wellness coach, a speaker, and a mental health advocate now. I'm passionate about lawyer well-being because I spent almost 40 years of my own life struggling with anxiety, OCD, panic disorders, depression, suicide ideation, disordered eating and drinking, and agoraphobia. I had my first panic attack when I was just 6 years old. So I'm a professional at this point. I chronicled that journey of finding freedom from my own disorders in that. It's called The Box, An Invitation to Freedom from Anxiety. And when that book came out in May of 2021, so did I, so to speak. No one in my life, but for a very small handful of people, knew that I had any mental health issues at all. No one at my firm, none of my clients, none of my friends. And so when the response was overwhelmingly positive, I could see clearly that there was an overwhelming need to talk about this. And I hadn't really been a part of this community before that at all. I was still struggling in silence. And I knew at that time that I wanted to start being a part of the change that was happening. You know, normalizing these conversations in our industry, promoting change, helping to erase the stigma. So at that time, in addition to practicing full time, I started coaching individuals. I created wellness programs based on the Hazelden Betty Ford study and the recommendations by the ABA that came out after that. I started a meditation group at Holland and Knight, my firm at the time. And then I started in 2022, my Perfectly Panicked podcast. So this was quickly becoming 2 full-time jobs that was also quickly becoming very unsustainable. And then in April of last year, I was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. So the next 6 months of my life were swallowed by surgeries and chemotherapy. But during that time, I was given the gift of silence and stillness, which I hadn't had since probably middle school, and an opportunity to really reflect on my career, to reimagine my future, and to really reset my compass. And that's when I created Cave Club, which is my global community, wellness community, that's exclusively for professional women. And I had been talking to women in the industry for years, really, even before my book came out, just about, common struggles. But then once the book came out, I became sort of this safe place, this safe person to really have deeper, more vulnerable conversations with them and to understand what their needs were and what was really lacking within my firm, other firm, the industry, and maybe what I could provide. So that community now is really that, along with my speaking and my programming and things like that. That's basically my platform and my full-time job now. It's really, I call it my ministry. And I know that today I'm really preaching to the choir, but my mission now is to democratize mental health and to destigmatize mental illness by disrupting the culture of silence and shame that I existed in for so long and that I still see is so strong now, especially as I see it in the club, in this community of women, just on a daily basis. So by disrupting that culture, I'm trying to really invite and inspire everyone to prioritize their mental health, their well-being, not just, not as a selfish act, because so many people still feel that way, but as a necessary one and as really a revolutionary one. And I call it a revolutionary one because the definition of revolution is replacing one system with another. And what I've been talking about a lot recently is that the system that's in place now just doesn't work because we've been really promoting and proselytizing all of these self-care and well-being practices. Like everyone knows that they should be exercising and meditating and taking micro breaks. And so we've been giving them the what, but we haven't given them the how. They don't have the permission or the system to really implement these practices into this incredibly overwhelming, busy life that attorneys have. And the mental aspect of it too, the current system, I see and I believe really promotes us putting everyone else's needs before our own, our clients. Like we know attorneys are really bad at taking care of themselves because they're taking care of everyone else first, not asking for what we need, what we need to really perform at our highest. Like you were talking about, like Adam and Nita were talking about perform, really optimizing our skills, having no boundaries in this new normal. And it makes us feel guilty when I talk to all of my members, my clients, they feel really guilty about taking time to recover, to reset, to recharge. They're afraid they're going to be labeled as not a committed partner, as not a committed lawyer, not a committed parent, team player. There's so much of that going on, from a mental perspective. And I think that message is really on some level that you're just not valuable enough to make this investment of time and money sometimes to take care of yourself. So this system, I feel like needs to change because it's not, cultural change comes from systemic change. So I've been preaching this new system on an individual level, like, and you can change culture individual by individual, but it's at glacial, you know, that progress is glacial. So really thinking about new systems that we can put into place to create and stimulate that cultural change, I think will come so much faster. Aristotle said that we are what we do repeatedly. So these systems can put that into place, things that we do repeatedly. Like leaders create systems that managers and practice leaders can use to effectuate the impactful and sustainable change that we're looking for. Otherwise, we're really just bringing these programs in and we're like crossing our fingers that people are going home and actually utilizing the EAPs and taking time to recharge. But we know honestly that just by the data that Adam was talking about, that that's really not happening. And when we rely on managers who are trained as attorneys, not necessarily as managers, to change cultures, and on individuals to break the molds that we've really cast them in to just be these incredible workers that will work themselves to the bone, it's truly unrealistic to think that sustainable progress can be made there. So just a few, yeah, I'll leave you with just a few, some anecdotal data that I got just from Cave Club, like the women that are taking advantage and the women that have taken advantage and then choose not to, and what that looks like, what the barriers to taking advantage of well-being services are. And what I found is that women who have it paid for by their employer or pay for it themselves because they are either the sole breadwinner or the higher breadwinner in their family, they are likely to stay. What I've heard consistently is women who have been in the club and love it and given it great reviews and are very involved in it will leave if their employer stops paying for it and they are not the higher breadwinner in their family, which goes to show that it's really not about the time or the financial investment. It's about still the shame and stigma. And I've heard specific comments that they don't want to admit to their partner or ask for the money from the family's money to really invest in themselves, which I think is just interesting data, because it goes to show that not only is that individual being negatively impacted by that stigma, but it goes to the companies and the firms and the corporations that they're working for as well. So just something to think about there. And thank you for having me. And thank you for Adam and Nita. That was I thought that was really an interesting conversation, and it's great to see so many familiar faces here. So thanks, Heidi.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us and the work that you're currently engaged with and all the passion that you bring to this, and also how we're thinking about how we can think about larger scale changes in the profession. So we definitely will continue to work with you, Wendy. Happy to have your contributions for sure. So thank you for being here. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stop the recording and